Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Life can be so busy sometimes that we can have a hard time finding the time for things that are really important.
It can be so challenging, can it, to allot the appropriate amount of time for the things that really matter?
In Ecclesiastes, it says to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. We can find time for the things that matter.
Right, but we have to have a healthy balance. We have to recognize what are our important relationships.
We want to look at our relationship with God, our marriage, our children, and ministry and work.
What are our roles, expectations, and responsibilities spiritually, relationally, educationally, mentally, emotionally, and so forth?
The list goes on.
It goes on in all of those areas.
In Matthew 24, Jesus said, "Who's a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord has made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season?" There's a time to be feeding the relationships, the people that are in your life with what they need.
And God is holding us responsible for the way we take care of those people that He's given us to give meat, to take care of, to maintain in our lives.
In this account, he said the person would be blessed if God finds them doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, and He's going to make that person ruler over all.
But it wasn't going to go well for the person that when he came back, they were being careless, abusive, negligent.
We aren't going to be given more responsibility until we're taking care of the things that we're supposed to be taking care of now properly.
If your family member feels you're being emotionally, verbally, certainly physically abusive, that needs to be dealt with. We don't need to have a response like, "No, I'm not." If they feel they are, they are. And so we need to be careful that in God's eyes, we are not being careless or negligent in these relationships.
We want to make sure that we are taking care of others and not making them pay the price for our wasting time. We want to make sure that we are feeding and nourishing those that we have to take care of.
Notice that in this scripture, the man was lavishing on himself those things God had given him that were meant for somebody else. So if we have a self-focus, we're probably taking from someone else that we should actually be taking care of.
And timing is so important. He shows here that you're supposed to be giving meat in due season. Something is owed to them, and there's a time that they need to receive that.
And so to take care of all these things, we need to set boundaries around these relationships to make time for what we believe is important.
Yeah, so many times if there was an emergency, a person can find time to go to the ER to take care of something, but we don't need to have that emergency room kind of mentality about taking care of our spouse, for example.
We don't want to take care of what's screaming for attention and neglect those things that are so important. And so we want to stop allowing the less important priorities to demand greater priority, but instead set those boundaries.
And we need to be intentional to make sure that we are being alert, we're being awake, we're being aware of the needs of those around us.
And so we don't want to mismanage things because we're not evaluating what should be a priority.
Managing our time is just like managing money. You have income, expenses. We need to be aware of what the necessities are. What does my spouse, my children, my relationship with God, what do all these things need?
Because just like our money, if we don't budget it, guess what? It just slips through our fingers and disappears.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is happening with our time. So first we want to look at, where is my time going and what do I want it to be spent on?
We need to be able to label what needs are and to know what wants are and be aware of distractions.
And lavish spending.
Yeah.
We don't want to spend on a new something for the house or eating out or entertainment while we're not paying the rent, so to speak, in our relationships.
Yeah. So where can we save time? What can we cut out? What can we bring in? And what are our priorities?
I would say look at the evenings and weekends, your time off, basically, times when you could invest in your family. How are you spending that time?
We need to look at making time for our relationships, fun, working through problems, keeping the air clear, and meeting needs.
You know, if we allow the problems to build up, or we've got dissatisfied members in our relationships, it's going to be difficult to minister to them. So some people overlook the keeping the air clear part and the fun. If we don't do that, we lose the excitement in the relationships and it can become bland.
You know, sometimes we can have excessive expenditures of time by one spouse without the agreement of the other one. We don't want to set up kind of a resentment there. We need to make sure that our spouse is in agreement on how we're spending our time.
We need to realize this is a we partnership going on with a husband and wife. And both parties should be seen in that decision making.
And we want to have periodic evaluations of how we're spending our time.
You know, in 1 Corinthians 7, it talks about our time with God. We wouldn't take away from the spouse to spend more time alone with God without consent. So how much more in decision making about other lesser things than time with God? We want to make sure that we're having those regular meetings to evaluate and talk about that.
Right. So budgeting our time is a great way to find out where it's escaping us and how to be intentional on spending time in the areas that matter the most.